My boyfriend hired someone to teach me self-defense. He picked the instructor who assaulted me at my last gym. I walked into the training studio and my whole body went cold when I saw him standing by the punching bags. Marcus Trent looked exactly the same as he had 2 years ago at Apex Fitness. Same buzz cut, same thick neck, same cocky stance with his arms crossed over his chest. He was wearing compression shorts and a tank top that showed off the tattoo sleeve on his right arm. The one I remembered staring at while he had me pinned against the locker room wall with his hand over my mouth. My boyfriend Ethan stood next to him, smiling wide, completely oblivious to the fact that he'd just hired my rapist to give me private self-defense lessons. Babe, this is Marcus. He's one of the top instructors in the city. I told him you wanted to learn real defensive techniques after that incident last month. The incident Ethan was referring to was when someone followed me to my car after work. Nothing happened because a security guard came by, but it shook me badly enough that I'd been having nightmares. Ethan said learning self-defense would help me feel safer and more in control. He said he'd found the perfect instructor through a colleague at work who swore by Marcus's methods. Marcus extended his hand toward me. Nice to meet you. Ethan told me a lot about you. We're going to make sure you can handle yourself in any situation. His voice was casual, friendly, professional, but when I looked into his eyes, I saw recognition. He knew exactly who I was, and he was pretending he didn't. I couldn't move, couldn't speak. My feet were frozen to the mat while Marcus's hand hung in the air between us. Ethan looked at me with concern. You okay? You look pale. Marcus dropped his hand slowly. First session jitters, totally normal. Why don't we start with some basic stance work? Get you comfortable before we move into contact drills. Contact drills. The words made my stomach turn. I forced myself to find my voice. Actually, I need to use the bathroom first. Be right back. I walked toward the restroom on shaking legs. Once inside, I locked the door and leaned against the sink. My reflection stared back at me in the mirror. Pale face, wide eyes, hands trembling. I'd spent 2 years trying to rebuild myself after what happened at Apex Fitness. 2 years of therapy, of learning to sleep without nightmares, of forcing myself to go back to the gym because I refused to let him take that from me too. I'd switched gyms, changed my routines, made sure I'd never have to see Marcus Trent again. And now my boyfriend had brought him right back into my life. I pulled out my phone and texted Ethan. Can I talk to you outside for a minute? Alone. He responded immediately. Everything okay? I typed back. Just come outside, please. I waited until I heard footsteps in the hallway, then opened the door. Ethan was standing there looking worried. What's wrong? You don't look good. I pulled him further down the hall, away from the studio entrance where Marcus might hear us. I can't train with him. We need to leave right now. Ethan's face showed confusion mixed with frustration. Why? Did he say something inappropriate already? I specifically asked around to make sure this guy was professional. I took a breath. I know him. From before. From Apex Fitness 2 years ago. Ethan's expression shifted to understanding. Then his face went hard. Wait, is he the one you told me about? The instructor who... I nodded before he could finish. He assaulted me in the locker room after a late training session, held me against the wall, put his hand over my mouth when I tried to scream, told me if I reported him, he'd make sure everyone knew I was asking for it by wearing tight workout clothes, that I'd been flirting with him for weeks. The memory came rushing back with perfect clarity. The smell of his cologne mixed with sweat, the way the cold tile pressed against my back, the fear that froze my entire body while he touched me, the shame that came after when I realized I'd never reported it because I was too afraid of what he'd do if I did. Ethan's hands clenched into fists. That son of a bitch. We're leaving right now and I'm calling the police. I grabbed his arm. Wait, just wait a second. Ethan stopped and looked at me. What do you mean, wait? He assaulted you and now he's pretending he doesn't even know you. That was the part that made my skin crawl. Marcus had recognized me immediately. I saw it in his eyes during that half second before he put on his professional instructor mask. He knew exactly who I was, and he'd chosen to pretend we'd never met, which meant he'd known I was Ethan's girlfriend before we even walked through the door. He knew, I said quietly. When Ethan contacted him and gave him my name, Marcus knew exactly who I was. He chose to take this job anyway. Ethan's face went pale. Are you saying he did this on purpose? Agreed to train you knowing what he did? I didn't want to believe it, but what other explanation made sense? Marcus could have declined the job. He could have told Ethan he had a schedule conflict or that his rates were too high or any number of reasonable excuses. Instead, he'd agreed to provide private one-on-one training sessions with a woman he'd sexually assaulted 2 years ago. Ethan pulled out his phone. I'm calling the police right now. This is stalking or harassment or something. He can't get away with this. I put my hand over his phone. No, not yet. I need to think. Ethan stared at me. Think about what? He assaulted you and now he's trying to get access to you again? There's nothing to think about. He was right, but something felt off about the whole situation. Marcus was a professional instructor with a reputation good enough that Ethan's colleague had recommended him. He taught at multiple gyms around the city. Why would he risk everything to take a training job with someone he'd assaulted? Who recommended him? I asked. Your colleague from work. What's his name? Ethan thought for a moment. Derek Vance from accounting. He said his girlfriend trained with Marcus for months and loved him. Said Marcus taught her techniques that actually worked in real situations. Why? Derek Vance. I didn't recognize that name, but I filed it away to research later. Did you tell Derek my name when you asked about instructors? Ethan nodded. Yeah, I said I was looking for someone to teach my girlfriend self-defense. I gave him your name so he could pass it to Marcus with the booking request. Why does that matter? It mattered because it meant Marcus had known exactly who was coming to that training session. He'd had advance warning, time to prepare, time to decide whether to take the job or decline it, and he'd chosen to take it. Ethan was getting agitated. We're leaving, right now, and then we're filing a police report. I should have agreed. Should have walked out of that building and gone straight to the nearest police station, but I kept thinking about something Marcus had said in the locker room 2 years ago. You'll never be able to prove anything. I'm a respected instructor with years of references. You're just another woman who can't handle intense training and wants to blame someone else for her weakness. He'd been right. I hadn't reported him because I knew it would be my word against his. No witnesses, no physical evidence, no proof of anything except that we'd been alone in the locker room together. But now he'd made a mistake. He'd inserted himself back into my life voluntarily. He'd created a situation where there would be documentation of our connection, training contracts, payment records, witnesses who knew we were working together. If I could figure out why he was doing this, maybe I could finally make him face consequences for what he did. I want to go back in there, I said. Ethan looked at me in disbelief. Are you insane? You can't train with him. I kept my voice steady. I'm not going to train with him. I'm going to see what he does, how he acts, what he says. Something about this doesn't add up, and I need to understand what's happening before we involve the police. Ethan shook his head. No, absolutely not. I'm not letting you anywhere near that guy. I understood why Ethan was being protective, but this was my decision to make. You'll be there the whole time. Marcus isn't going to try anything with you standing right next to me, but I need to see what he's planning, why he agreed to this, because there's a reason, and I need to know what it is. Ethan struggled with the decision for a long moment. Finally, he nodded reluctantly. Fine. But if he does anything, says anything inappropriate, we're done. And I'm staying within arm's reach of you the entire time. We walked back into the studio together. Marcus was stretching near the heavy bag, looking completely relaxed. When we entered, he smiled warmly. All good? Ready to get started? I forced myself to meet his eyes. Sorry about that. Just needed a minute. Marcus gestured toward the mats. No problem. Let's talk about what you want to learn. Ethan mentioned someone followed you to your car recently. That's scary. Let's make sure you have the skills to handle a situation like that if it happens again. His voice was so sincere, so professional. If I didn't know better, I'd think he genuinely cared about my safety. Before we start, I said carefully, have we met before? You look familiar. I watched his face closely. For just a fraction of a second, something flickered in his eyes. Amusement, maybe, or satisfaction. Then it was gone. I don't think so. I'd remember. I teach at a lot of gyms around the city, though. Maybe you've seen me around? He was good at lying. His expression stayed neutral. His tone remained friendly. But I'd seen the flash of something darker underneath. He was enjoying this. Maybe, I said. What gym do you work at? Marcus started listing locations. I'm at Ironclad Fitness downtown, Peak Performance in the suburbs, and I do private sessions at the studio. I used to work at a few other places, but I've consolidated recently. I noticed he didn't mention Apex Fitness, didn't acknowledge he'd ever worked there. What about Apex Fitness? Did you ever teach there? His expression didn't change. Yeah, I was there a couple years ago. Why? Did you train there? I let the question hang in the air for a moment. I used to, 2 years ago, right around the time you were working there. Marcus nodded slowly. Small world. There were a lot of members, though. I can't remember everyone. Ethan was watching this exchange with growing tension. His jaw was clenched and his hands were balled into fists. I could tell he wanted to say something, to call Marcus out directly, but I shook my head slightly, warning him to stay quiet. Strange that you don't remember, I said. We had several training sessions together. You gave me one-on-one instruction in the evenings when the gym was less crowded. Marcus's smile never wavered. I taught a lot of one-on-one sessions back then, hard to keep track of everyone. But hey, if we worked together before, even better. You'll already know my teaching style. The audacity was breathtaking. He was standing there denying we'd ever met while simultaneously acknowledging that we might have trained together, playing both sides so he could adjust his story later depending on how things developed. Ethan finally spoke up. If you don't remember her, how can you be sure your teaching style will work for her needs? Smart question. Marcus didn't miss a beat. Fair point. Why don't we do an assessment first? See what your current skill level is, what your natural reflexes are. Then I can tailor the training to fit you specifically. He looked at me. Sound good? Every instinct screamed at me to leave, but I needed to understand what was happening, why Marcus had agreed to this, what he was planning. Let's do the assessment, I said. Marcus nodded and moved to the center of the mats. Great. Come stand here. Ethan, you can watch from over there if you want. Give us room to work. Ethan didn't move. I'll stay right here, Marcus shrugged. Your call. Okay, let's start with basic awareness. I'm going to come at you from different angles. Don't think too much. Just react naturally. I need to see what your instincts do under pressure. He circled around behind me. Every muscle in my body went rigid. 2 years ago, he'd approached me from behind in the locker room, grabbed me before I knew he was there, slammed me against the wall. Now he was doing it again, positioning himself where I couldn't see him. Relax, Marcus said from behind me. Tension makes you slower. Take a breath. I heard his footsteps move closer, felt the air shift as he raised his hands. Then his fingers touched my shoulders and I spun around hard, shoving him backward with both hands. Don't touch me. The words came out louder than I intended, sharp and panicked. Marcus held up his hands in a gesture of surrender. Whoa, okay, no touching. I get it. Some people need to warm up to contact training. We can work up to it slowly. Ethan was at my side immediately. You okay? I nodded, but my heart was racing. Marcus watched us with that same professional concern on his face. It's actually good that you have that reaction. Strong boundaries are important. A lot of self-defense is about trusting your gut. If something feels wrong, it usually is. The irony of those words coming from him made me want to scream. This was the man who'd ignored every boundary, every verbal and physical signal that I didn't want what he was doing. And now he was teaching me to trust my instincts while he stood there pretending we'd never met. I pulled out my phone. I need to record this, for my own reference, to review the techniques later. Marcus hesitated for just a second. Usually I don't allow recording during private sessions, liability issues, but if it helps you learn, I guess it's fine. I opened the recording app and positioned my phone on a shelf where it would capture the entire mat area. Thanks, it really will help. Marcus resumed the assessment, keeping his distance this time. He had me practice different stances, showed me where to place my weight, explained how to protect vulnerable areas. His instruction was technically solid, professional, appropriate. If this was my first time meeting him, I'd think he was exactly what Ethan described, a top instructor who took his job seriously. But I kept watching for the mask to slip, for some hint of the man I remembered from Apex Fitness. After an hour, Marcus called time. That's good for today. You have decent natural instincts, but we need to work on your confidence. You second-guess yourself too much. Next session, we'll start building muscle memory for basic defensive moves. Grabs, holds, that kind of thing. Ethan spoke up. What kind of holds? Marcus gestured casually. Standard stuff. Wrist grabs, bear hugs, someone coming at you from behind. I'll show her how to break free and create distance. Essential skills for the kind of situation she experienced. The kind of situation she experienced. He meant the parking lot incident, but I wondered if he was also referring to what happened at Apex Fitness, testing me to see if I'd react. Ethan pulled out his wallet. How much do we owe you for today? Marcus quoted a price that seemed reasonable. Ethan paid in cash and Marcus wrote out a receipt. Same time next week? I took the receipt and studied it. Actually, I'd like to schedule twice a week if possible. I want to learn quickly. Marcus pulled out his phone and checked his calendar. I can do that. How about Thursday evenings and Saturday mornings? I agreed and we set up the schedule. As we were leaving, Marcus called out, Hey, before you go, just want to say I appreciate you giving this a shot even though you were nervous. Takes courage to face your fears. You're going to do great. The words sounded encouraging, supportive, but the look in his eyes when he said face your fears made my stomach turn. He knew. He absolutely knew. Once we were outside, Ethan exploded. What the hell was that? You're scheduling more sessions with him? After everything he did to you? I kept walking toward the car. I need to figure out what he's doing. Why he's pretending we've never met. What his endgame is. Ethan grabbed my arm gently, stopping me. His endgame is probably to hurt you again, or to get off on having power over you, or to make sure you never report what he did. None of those are reasons to keep seeing him. I turned to face Ethan. 2 years ago, I let him win. I was too scared to report him, too afraid no one would believe me, too worried about what he'd do if I tried to fight back. And he walked away without any consequences. He kept teaching, kept working with women, probably kept assaulting them. I have a chance now to figure out what he's doing and stop him. I can't let him win again. Ethan's face softened. I get it. I do. But you're putting yourself at risk. What if he tries something? I pulled out my phone and showed him the recording from today's session. I'm documenting everything. Every session will be recorded. You'll be there as a witness. If he does anything, we'll have proof. More proof than I had 2 years ago when it was just my word against his. Ethan thought about this for a long moment. Okay, but I'm never leaving you alone with him. Not for 1 second. And if at any point you feel unsafe, we're done. No arguments. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the training session in my mind, analyzing every word Marcus said, every expression on his face. He'd been so careful, so professional. But I'd seen the recognition when I first walked in. I'd seen the flicker of amusement when I asked if we'd met before. He was playing a game and I needed to figure out the rules. Around 2 a.m., I got out of bed and went to my laptop. I started searching for information about Marcus Trent, his instructor profiles at different gyms, his social media accounts, any news articles or reviews or complaints. What I found was concerning. Marcus had excellent reviews from dozens of clients, 5-star ratings across multiple platforms, testimonials from women saying he'd helped them feel safer and more confident, photos of him at self-defense workshops and martial arts competitions. On paper, he looked like exactly the kind of instructor anyone would want to hire. But then I dug deeper. I searched for his name combined with words like complaint and inappropriate and misconduct. Most results were unrelated. But buried in a forum for a gym in the suburbs, I found a thread from 3 years ago. A woman using a pseudonym had posted about an instructor who'd made her uncomfortable during private training sessions. She didn't name him, but she described the gym's location and the timeline matched when Marcus worked there. The responses to her post were mixed. Some people offered support. Others questioned whether she was misinterpreting professional instruction as inappropriate contact. A few suggested she was being too sensitive. The woman had posted a follow-up saying she'd reported the instructor to gym management. They'd investigated and found no wrongdoing. Told her the instructor's contact during training was necessary and appropriate. Suggested she might be more comfortable in group classes if she was uncomfortable with one-on-one sessions. She never posted again after that. I screenshotted the entire thread and saved it to a folder. Then I kept searching. Over the next 2 hours, I found 3 more similar posts on different forums and review sites. All anonymous. All vague enough that they couldn't be definitively linked to Marcus. But the patterns were consistent. Women describing an instructor who made them uncomfortable. Contact that seemed to last too long. Touches that felt unnecessary. Comments about their bodies disguised as instruction feedback. And in every case, when they reported it, they were dismissed. Told they were misunderstanding. Assured the instructor was professional and respected. Made to feel like they were the problem. I compiled everything into a document and sent it to my email. Then I researched Derek Vance, Ethan's colleague who'd recommended Marcus. Derek had worked at Ethan's company for 5 years, married, 2 kids, active on social media. His wife's name was Bethany. I searched for Bethany Vance and found her Instagram. She posted regularly about fitness and had mentioned training with an amazing instructor about a year ago. Never named him, but the timing matched. I sent her a direct message. Hi, I hope this isn't weird. My boyfriend Ethan works with your husband Derek. Ethan mentioned Derek recommended a self-defense instructor for me. I'm trying to learn more about different instructors before I commit. Would you be willing to chat about your experience? I didn't expect a response, but within 20 minutes she replied. Sure, I trained with Marcus Trent for about 6 months. He was great. Really helped me feel more confident. I messaged back. That's good to hear. Did you do private sessions or group classes? Bethany responded quickly. Private sessions at first, then I switched to group classes. The private sessions were more intensive, but I felt like I learned faster in the group setting. Interesting. She'd switched from private to group. I asked why. Was there a specific reason you switched to group classes? There was a longer pause before her response came through. Private sessions were just really intense. A lot of physical contact. It was effective, but I felt more comfortable with other people around. I thanked her for the information and said I'd probably start with group classes. She sent back a friendly emoji and we ended the conversation. But I noticed she'd been careful with her words. Really intense, and lot of physical contact, and more comfortable with other people around. She hadn't said anything explicitly negative about Marcus, but she hadn't exactly given him a glowing review either. I added notes from our conversation to my document. The next morning, I made an appointment with my therapist, Dr. Angela Reeves. I'd been seeing her for 2 years, working through what happened at Apex Fitness. She'd helped me process the trauma, taught me coping strategies for the anxiety and nightmares. I trusted her completely. When I walked into her office that afternoon, she could tell immediately that something was wrong. What happened? I told her everything. The training session Ethan had booked, seeing Marcus again, his denial that we'd ever met, my decision to keep training with him to figure out what he was doing. Dr. Reeves listened without interrupting. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. I want to make sure I understand. You're intentionally putting yourself in close proximity to your assailant, in a situation where physical contact is expected, because you want to understand his motivations? Put that way, it sounded insane. I tried to explain. He agreed to train me knowing who I was. That means he's planning something. I need to know what. Dr. Reeves leaned forward. Or he's a predator who saw an opportunity to re-victimize someone he hurt before. Predators often target the same victims repeatedly because they've already established psychological dominance. By continuing to train with him, you might be giving him exactly what he wants. I hadn't thought about it that way. So, you think I should stop the sessions? Dr. Reeves shook her head. I think you should do what feels right for you, but I want you to consider the possibility that there might not be a grand plan. He might have agreed to train you simply because he can, because he knows you won't report him, because he's confident he can control the narrative if you try. And by continuing to engage with him, you might be re-traumatizing yourself for information that won't help you get justice. The session continued for another hour. Dr. Reeves helped me identify what I was really hoping to accomplish. I wanted proof of Marcus's pattern of behavior. I wanted evidence that would convince authorities to investigate him. I wanted other women to know they weren't alone if he'd hurt them too. And maybe underneath all that, I wanted him to admit what he'd done, to acknowledge it out loud so I could stop questioning my own memories. Dr. Reeves gave me homework. Before the next session with Marcus, I needed to write down my goals and my boundaries, what I hoped to learn, what I was willing to risk, what would make me walk away. She also strongly encouraged me to contact the police and file a report about the original assault, regardless of whether I continued training with Marcus. I left her office with a lot to think about. That evening, I sat down with Ethan and showed him everything I'd found. The forum posts, the conversation with Bethany, the patterns I'd identified. Ethan read through the document carefully. This is good. This shows he's done this before. We should take this to the police right now. I'd been thinking about that. The posts are all anonymous. No names, no specific dates, no concrete evidence. And they all say they reported him and nothing happened. If we go to the police with this, they'll see the same thing management at those gyms saw, vague complaints that couldn't be substantiated. Ethan looked frustrated. So what do we do? I pulled out the paper I'd written earlier, following Dr. Reeves's instructions. We continue training, but we're strategic about it. We document everything. We record every session. We create a paper trail showing that he knew who I was and chose to take me on as a client anyway, and we watch for him to make a mistake. Ethan read my list. What kind of mistake? I'd thought about this carefully. He's going to push boundaries. Not at first, but eventually. He'll find excuses for unnecessary contact. He'll make comments that are technically appropriate but feel wrong. He'll test to see how much I'll tolerate. And when he does, we'll have it on video. The second training session was that Thursday evening. Ethan and I arrived at the studio and found Marcus already there, setting up equipment. Hey, ready for session 2? He seemed genuinely enthusiastic. I set up my phone to record before we started. Marcus noticed but didn't comment. The session began with him demonstrating basic defense against wrist grabs. He showed the technique on Ethan first, explaining the mechanics of how to break someone's grip using leverage rather than strength. Then he asked me to practice on Ethan. I grabbed Ethan's wrist and he broke free using the technique Marcus had shown. We practiced several times until I could execute the defense consistently. Then Marcus said it was time to practice with him as the attacker. The technique is the same, but I'm going to grip harder than Ethan did. Real attackers won't be gentle. You need to experience realistic pressure. He was right. The training needed to be realistic to be effective. But when Marcus grabbed my wrist, his fingers dug into my skin hard enough to hurt. I tried to break free using the technique he'd taught, but his grip was too strong. Good effort, Marcus said. But you're telegraphing your movement. I can see you're about to try the technique before you do it. In a real situation, that gives the attacker time to adjust. Try again, but this time don't think about it. Just do it. We practiced for 20 minutes. Each time his grip got progressively harder. By the end, my wrist was red and tender. Ethan noticed. Is it supposed to hurt that much? Marcus released my wrist immediately and examined it. Sorry, sometimes I get too focused on realism and forget to calibrate. Let me get some ice. He went to the small refrigerator in the corner and came back with an ice pack. As he pressed it gently against my wrist, he said, You did great, though. Most people give up when the pressure increases. You kept trying. That's the attitude that will keep you safe in a real situation. His hand lingered on my wrist longer than necessary. His thumb traced a small circle on my skin. It could have been an absent gesture, or it could have been intentional. I pulled my hand back. Thanks, I'm okay. Marcus nodded and stepped back. The rest of the session continued without incident. When we finished, I checked the recording to make sure it had captured everything. It had, including the moment when Marcus held my wrist after applying the ice pack. The footage showed his thumb moving in that small circle, evidence of contact that lasted longer than necessary. I saved the video to 3 different cloud storage accounts. That night, I reviewed the footage frame by frame. The wrist grab training had been aggressive, but arguably within the bounds of realistic self-defense instruction. The ice pack moment was more ambiguous. His hand had lingered, but he'd released it when I pulled away. Nothing explicitly inappropriate, but there was a pattern forming. Physical contact that pushed boundaries without crossing any clear line. Over the next 3 weeks, Marcus continued to escalate slowly. During our Saturday session, he demonstrated a defense against bear hugs by wrapping his arms around me from behind. His grip was tight, almost painfully so. He held it for what felt like too long while explaining the technique to Ethan. Thursday's session involved ground defense. Marcus showed me how to escape if someone pinned me down. He positioned himself on top of me, his weight pressing me into the mat. A lot of attacks happen when the victim is already down. You need to know how to create space and get away. His body was heavy against mine. I could feel his breath on my face. My heart rate spiked and my breathing became rapid. Panic attack. I knew the signs. Get off, I managed to say. Marcus immediately rolled off me and moved away. You okay? Too much too fast? I sat up, trying to steady my breathing. Ethan was next to me in seconds. Take your time, deep breaths. Marcus watched from a respectful distance. Ground fighting can be really triggering. We can skip it if you need to, or I can demonstrate on Ethan and you can just watch the technique. The consideration seemed genuine, But I noticed he'd chosen this particular drill. Ground fighting where he was on top of me, pinning me down, just like he'd done in the Apex Fitness locker room 2 years ago. I forced myself to breathe slowly. No, I need to learn this. Just give me a minute. After I recovered, we continued the session. But I made Marcus demonstrate everything on Ethan first. Then I practiced the escapes with Ethan as my attacker, while Marcus watched and corrected my form. Marcus didn't push back. He adjusted the lesson plan without complaint. That night, I reviewed all the recordings from our sessions. I'd accumulated 9 hours of footage over 5 sessions. I created a timeline documenting every moment of unnecessary contact, every comment that felt off, every time Marcus's instructions seemed designed more to test my boundaries than to teach me defensive skills. The pattern was there. But would anyone else see it? The touches were always explainable as part of training. The comments were always framed as instruction. Marcus was extremely careful not to cross any clear line. On week 6, everything changed. I arrived at the studio for my Thursday session and Marcus was alone. "Where's Ethan?" Marcus checked his phone. He texted me about 20 minutes ago, said he got caught up at work and would be a few minutes late, told me to start without him if he wasn't here by session time. I pulled out my phone and checked my messages. Nothing from Ethan. I called him. It went straight to voicemail. "I'll wait for him," I told Marcus. "We can start when he gets here." Marcus shrugged. "Your call, but you're paying for the hour either way. Might as well make use of the time. We can do some solo drills. Footwork, stance work, stuff that doesn't require a partner." He had a point. And the studio was in a commercial building with other businesses on the same floor. There were people around. I wasn't truly alone with him. "Okay, let's work on footwork." I set up my phone to record as always. Marcus walked me through various movement patterns, how to maintain distance from an aggressor, how to position myself near exits, how to read body language that indicated an attack was coming. It was actually useful information, and Marcus stayed professional throughout. Then he said something that made my blood run cold. "You know, I've been thinking about your specific situation, the parking lot incident where someone followed you. That's a really common scenario, and we haven't practiced it directly yet." I kept my voice neutral. "What did you have in mind?" Marcus gestured toward the door. "The hallway outside has good lighting and some distance. I could play the aggressor following you. You practice the awareness and response techniques we've covered, more realistic than doing it in here on the mats." Something felt wrong about this. "Let's wait for Ethan. He should be here soon." Marcus nodded easily. "Sure, no pressure. Just thought it might be helpful since that's the specific scenario that started this whole training in the first place." He paused. "Actually, speaking of that, I wanted to apologize." I went very still. "Apologize for what?" Marcus met my eyes directly. "I know we've met before, at Apex Fitness. You trained there 2 years ago, and I was one of the instructors." Finally, after 6 weeks of pretending, he was acknowledging it. "Why did you lie about remembering me?" Marcus's expression remained calm. "I didn't lie. I just didn't bring it up immediately because I wanted to see if you'd mention it first. When you didn't, I figured you either didn't remember me or you didn't think it was relevant. I didn't want to make things awkward by bringing up old history." The explanation sounded reasonable, but there was something underneath it, something that didn't quite fit. "We did more than just train together," I said carefully. "Something happened in the locker room." Marcus's face showed confusion, perfectly calibrated confusion that seemed genuine but felt rehearsed. "In the locker room? I don't remember that. What happened?" This was the moment. I could confront him directly about the assault, tell him I remembered every detail of what he'd done, watch his reaction. But something stopped me. The way he was looking at me with that confused, concerned expression. The way he'd phrased his question as if he genuinely didn't know what I was referring to. He was setting a trap. If I accused him outright, he'd express shock. He'd deny it completely. He'd suggest I was confused or misremembering. And we'd be right back where we started 2 years ago. My word against his, with no evidence. "Never mind," I said. "I must be thinking of someone else." Marcus studied my face for a long moment. "Are you sure? You seem upset. If something happened that made you uncomfortable, I'd want to know about it. Even if it was with a different instructor. That kind of stuff shouldn't happen in training environments." He sounded so sincere, so concerned for my well-being. It made me want to scream. Before I could respond, the studio door opened. Ethan rushed in looking frazzled. "I'm so sorry. My phone died and there was an accident on the highway. Traffic was completely stopped." I felt relief wash through me. "It's fine. We were just doing footwork drills." Marcus gave Ethan a friendly wave. "No worries. These things happen. Want to jump in? We've got about 30 minutes left." The session continued normally, but I couldn't stop thinking about what Marcus had said. "I know we've met before." After 6 weeks of denial, he'd finally acknowledged our history at Apex Fitness. But he'd claimed not to remember anything happening in the locker room, which meant he was still lying, still pretending, still playing his game. That night, I told Ethan everything Marcus had said. "He admitted he remembered you from Apex Fitness?" Ethan's face was hard. "That changes things. We need to confront him directly. Tell him you remember what he did and see how he reacts." I shook my head. He's too smart for that. He'd just deny everything and we'd have no proof. But he's starting to make mistakes. He's acknowledging things he previously denied. That means he's getting comfortable, confident, and that's when predators slip up. Ethan pulled me close. I don't like this. I don't like you being around him at all. Every session, I'm terrified he's going to hurt you again. I understood his fear because I felt it too. But I was also close to something. I could feel it. Marcus was building towards something, some endgame I didn't quite understand yet. Over the next 2 weeks, I focused on documenting everything more carefully. I started keeping a detailed journal of each session. Not just what happened, but how Marcus positioned himself, what he said, how long he maintained contact, what Ethan witnessed versus what happened when Ethan looked away. The patterns became clearer. Marcus was most careful when Ethan was watching, but during moments when Ethan was distracted or turned away, Marcus would find reasons to touch me, a hand on my back to adjust my stance, fingers on my arm to demonstrate a grip. Nothing that would seem inappropriate to an outside observer, but always slightly more contact than necessary, always held slightly too long. I also noticed Marcus was increasingly interested in when Ethan might not be available. Next week's schedule is getting complicated, Marcus said during our 10th session. I have a conference on Saturday. Would you want to move that session to Friday evening instead? Or we could skip a week. I made a point of checking with Ethan. Friday evening works for you? Ethan nodded. Yeah, I'm free. Marcus looked disappointed for just a fraction of a second. Then he smiled. Great, Friday it is. But when Friday arrived, Ethan got called into an emergency work meeting that couldn't be rescheduled. He called me an hour before the session. I'm so sorry. This project is on fire and my boss is demanding I stay until it's fixed. Can you reschedule with Marcus? I could reschedule, or I could go to the session alone and see what Marcus did when Ethan wasn't there as a witness. It's fine, I told Ethan. I'll go. It's a public building. I'll be safe. Ethan hesitated. I don't know. Maybe skip this one. I kept my voice light. I've been training for 10 weeks. I think I can handle a single session alone. What I didn't say was that I wanted to see how Marcus behaved without Ethan's presence, whether he'd drop the professional mask, whether he'd finally reveal what he was really doing. I arrived at the studio and Marcus was waiting. When he saw I was alone, something shifted in his expression. Just for a moment. Satisfaction, maybe. Ethan couldn't make it? I set up my phone to record as usual. He got stuck at work. Emergency project. Marcus nodded slowly. That's too bad. But hey, we can still get good work done. Actually, this might be better. Sometimes people hold back when they have an audience. Let's see what you can do when it's just us. The session started normally. We reviewed techniques we'd covered in previous sessions. Marcus maintained professional distance and kept his instruction appropriate. But about 30 minutes in, he suggested we work on a new scenario. I want to practice a simulation. You're walking to your car. I'm following you. Show me how you'd use the awareness and defense skills we've covered. I agreed, and Marcus set up the scenario. He moved to one end of the studio while I walked toward the other end, pretending it was a parking lot. As I walked, I used the techniques he'd taught me, checking reflections in windows, staying aware of my surroundings, positioning myself so my back wasn't exposed. Marcus followed several paces behind, playing the role of a potential threat. When I reached the car at the far end of the studio, Marcus suddenly moved faster. He grabbed my arm from behind and spun me around. His other hand went to my shoulder, pinning me against the wall. What do you do now? His face was inches from mine. His voice was low. Someone's got you cornered. They're stronger than you. They're faster than you. What's your move? I used the technique he'd taught me weeks ago, stomped on his instep, drove my elbow into his ribs, pushed hard against his chest to create space. Marcus released me and backed up, nodding. Good. Better than good. That was perfect. But his eyes were intense in a way I'd never seen during our training sessions. Something had shifted. The professional instructor mask had slipped. Let's run it again, Marcus said. This time I won't let go so easily. You need to fight harder. We ran the scenario 3 more times. Each time Marcus held on longer, gripped tighter, made it harder for me to break free. By the 4th run, I was breathing hard and my arms ached from fighting against his hold. One more time, Marcus said. But this time, I want you to really commit. Imagine I'm the person from the parking lot, the one who followed you, who made you afraid. Show me how you'd fight if your life depended on it. I positioned myself at the starting point again. Marcus followed me across the studio. When I reached the wall, he grabbed me hard and spun me around. His hand went to my throat, not squeezing, just resting there. A threat. Fight me, he said quietly. Show me you learned something. I drove my knee up toward his groin. Marcus blocked it and pushed me harder against the wall. Harder. You're not trying hard enough. I threw an elbow at his face. Marcus caught my arm and pinned it above my head. His body was pressed against mine. We were back in the Apex Fitness locker room. The same position, the same pressure, the same feeling of being trapped with no way out. Please stop, I said. Marcus didn't move. What did you just say? My voice came out stronger this time. I said stop. Training's over. Let me go. Marcus held the position for 3 more seconds, long enough to make his point. Then he released me and stepped back. You need to be more aggressive. In a real situation, being polite gets you hurt. You have to fight dirty. I moved away from the wall. My phone was still recording from across the studio. I think that's enough for tonight. Marcus wiped sweat from his forehead. Probably right. That was intense, but good work. You're getting stronger, more confident. He walked over to his bag and pulled out a water bottle, took a long drink. Hey, can I ask you something? Off the record, just between us. I stayed near the exit. What? Marcus met my eyes. Do you actually remember what happened at Apex Fitness, in the locker room? My heart hammered against my ribs. This was it, the moment I'd been waiting for. Yes, I remember everything. Marcus nodded slowly. I thought so. You've been acting weird since the first session. Tense, scared. I figured you remembered but didn't want to say anything. He paused. I think about it sometimes too. The admission stunned me. You think about assaulting me? Marcus's expression shifted, became harder. That's not what happened. You came on to me, made it clear you were interested, then got scared afterward and tried to reframe it as something I did wrong. I felt ice spread through my chest. That's a lie. I never came on to you. You attacked me. Marcus took a step closer. That's not how I remember it. And if it ever came down to your word against mine, I'm the one with the spotless reputation, the one with dozens of references from satisfied clients. You're the one who's been training with me for weeks even though you claim I assaulted you. What jury would believe you're actually afraid of me when you voluntarily kept coming back? He'd planned this, all of it. Agreed to train me so he could establish a pattern of voluntary contact. Build a narrative where I'd been willingly spending time with him, paying him to teach me, recording our sessions but never once showing signs of fear or distress to outside observers. I grabbed my phone and headed for the door. We're done. I'm never coming back. Marcus didn't try to stop me, just called out as I reached the exit. That recording you've been making shows me being a professional instructor, shows you participating willingly in every drill, shows me stopping immediately every time you asked. If you try to report me for anything, that footage is going to make you look like you're making things up. Again. I ran to my car and locked the doors. My hands shook so badly I could barely get the key in the ignition. Marcus stood in the doorway of the studio watching me. Not threatening, not following, just watching with that confident expression that said he'd won. I drove home in a state of shock. Marcus had finally dropped the mask, acknowledged what happened at Apex Fitness, but he'd reframed it as consensual. And he was right about the recordings, weeks of footage showing me training voluntarily with him, never once mentioning the previous assault on camera, never showing obvious distress. From the outside, it looked exactly how Marcus described, a woman working with an instructor she was comfortable with. When I got home, Ethan was already there. His work emergency had resolved faster than expected. He took one look at my face and knew something had happened. I told him everything. How Marcus had pushed the training harder, how he'd pinned me against the wall, how he'd finally acknowledged the Apex Fitness assault but claimed it was consensual, how he'd pointed out that all our recordings would actually help his defense, not mine. Ethan went white with rage. He admitted it. He admitted he knows what happened. That's evidence. That's proof. I shook my head. He admitted we had an encounter. He claims it was consensual. That's not the same thing. And he's right about the recordings. I've got 10 weeks of footage showing me training voluntarily with my supposed attacker. Any defense attorney would use that to destroy my credibility. Ethan pulled out his phone. We're calling the police right now, filing a report, getting a restraining order, something. I wanted to agree, but I was terrified that going to the police would make things worse. Marcus had spent 10 weeks building his defense. He had documentation showing I'd sought him out for training, financial records showing I'd paid him, videos showing him stopping whenever I asked. What did I have? Forum posts from anonymous users, a conversation with Bethany Vance who'd switched to group classes but never filed a complaint, my own word about an assault 2 years ago that I'd never reported. It wasn't enough. Ethan made the call anyway. He explained the situation to the police dispatcher and was transferred to a detective named Linda Kowalski. Detective Kowalski listened to the summary and said she'd like to meet with us the next morning to get a full statement. That night, I barely slept. I kept playing through how the police interview would go. They'd ask why I never reported the original assault, why I'd agreed to train with Marcus if I was afraid of him, why I'd continued for 10 weeks if he was making me uncomfortable. And I'd have to explain that I was trying to gather evidence, that I was trying to prove a pattern. But it would sound like I was trying to build a case against someone who'd never done anything wrong. The next morning, Ethan and I went to the police station. Detective Kowalski was in her 40s with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense attitude. She led us to an interview room and pulled out a notepad. Start from the beginning. Tell me everything. I walked her through the timeline. The original assault at Apex Fitness 2 years ago. How I'd never reported it because Marcus threatened me and I was afraid no one would believe me. How Ethan had hired Marcus to teach me self-defense without knowing our history. How Marcus had recognized me but pretended we'd never met. How he'd spent 10 weeks carefully pushing boundaries while maintaining plausible deniability. How last night he'd finally acknowledged the assault but claimed it was consensual. Detective Kowalski took detailed notes. When I finished, she asked the questions I'd been dreading. Why didn't you report the original assault? I explained about Marcus's threats, about his reputation versus mine, about being afraid of what he'd do if I tried to fight back. Why did you continue training with him once you realized who he was? I explained about wanting to understand what he was planning, about hoping to gather evidence of a pattern, about trying to protect other women he might hurt. Detective Kowalski's expression was hard to read. Did Mr. Trent ever explicitly threaten you during these training sessions? I thought carefully. He pushed physical contact beyond what was comfortable, but he always framed it as part of the training. He never said anything directly threatening. The detective made more notes. Did he ever continue physical contact after you asked him to stop? I remembered the moment last night when I'd said, "Please stop," and Marcus had held me against the wall for 3 more seconds before releasing me. Once, last night, but he did let go after a few seconds. Detective Kowalski looked up from her notes. Did you capture that on video? I nodded. All our sessions were recorded. Detective Kowalski asked to see the recordings. I pulled out my phone and showed her the footage from the previous night. She watched carefully, paying attention to the moment when Marcus pinned me against the wall and I said, "Please stop." She watched his 3-second delay before releasing me. That's not great, but it's not quite enough for criminal charges. He did let you go fairly quickly after you asked. My heart sank. So there's nothing you can do? Detective Kowalski closed her notepad. I can talk to Mr. Trent, get his side of the story, but based on what you've told me, it's going to be difficult to pursue criminal charges. The original assault was 2 years ago with no contemporaneous report. The recent training sessions were consensual arrangements where you participated willingly. The boundary violations you're describing are concerning, but they're all explainable as overly aggressive training methods. She saw my expression and her voice softened. I believe you. I've seen this pattern before with predators in positions of authority. They're very careful to maintain plausibility, but believing you and having enough evidence to prosecute are 2 different things. Ethan spoke up. What about the women on those forums? The ones who complained about an instructor matching Marcus's description? Detective Kowalski made a note. I'll look into those. If we can find other victims willing to come forward and testify, that establishes a pattern. But anonymous forum posts aren't enough on their own. We left the police station feeling defeated. Detective Kowalski had promised to investigate, but she'd made it clear that criminal charges were unlikely. I'd spent 10 weeks gathering evidence, and it still wasn't enough. That afternoon, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Is this the woman who's been training with Marcus Trent? The voice on the other end was female, nervous. I sat up straighter. Yes, who is this? There was a pause. My name is Jenna Walsh. I trained with Marcus 3 years ago at Peak Performance Gym. I saw your name in some articles about him being investigated by police. I need to talk to you. Jenna. One of the women from the forums. She agreed to meet me at a coffee shop that evening. When I arrived, I found a woman in her late 20s sitting at a corner table. She looked up when I approached, and I saw recognition in her eyes. You're the one who's finally standing up to him. We sat down and Jenna told me her story. She'd trained with Marcus for 4 months. Private sessions, similar to mine. At first, everything had been professional, but gradually, Marcus had started pushing boundaries. Touches that lasted too long, comments about her body disguised as training feedback. He'd created situations where she ended up pinned beneath him on the mat, holding the position longer than necessary while explaining techniques. When Jenna had mentioned feeling uncomfortable, Marcus had told her that discomfort was part of effective training, that she needed to push through her nervousness to really learn, that her hesitation was exactly the kind of weakness an attacker would exploit. Did you report him? I asked. Jenna nodded. I went to gym management, told them everything. They investigated and said they reviewed his teaching methods and found nothing inappropriate. They suggested I might be more comfortable in group classes. I felt like they were telling me I was the problem. This was exactly what I'd feared. Marcus had refined his methods over years. He knew exactly how far he could push before someone complained. And when they did complain, he'd built enough plausibility that management sided with him. There have to be others, I said. He's been teaching for at least 5 years. There have to be more women he's done this to. Jenna agreed. I've been looking. After I saw the articles about you, I started reaching out to women who'd trained with him. I found 2 more willing to talk. Over the next week, I met with Rachel Ortiz and Kimberly Durant. Both had similar stories. Private training with Marcus that started professionally but gradually became uncomfortable. Inappropriate contact framed as necessary instruction. Complaints to gym management that went nowhere. A pattern stretching back 5 years involving at least 4 women that we knew of. Detective Kowalski was interested when I brought her the names and contact information. She interviewed all 4 of us separately, then together. This is helpful, she said after hearing all our stories. Pattern evidence is powerful, but I need you to understand something. Marcus Trent is smart. He's never crossed the line far enough to leave physical evidence. He's never made explicit threats. Everything he does is explainable as aggressive but legitimate training methods. A good defense attorney will argue that you all misinterpreted professional instruction as inappropriate contact. Detective Kowalski continued. That said, I'm going to recommend the district attorney's office review this case. With 4 victims willing to testify to the same pattern, we might be able to pursue charges, but it's going to be an uphill battle. The district attorney's office took 3 months to review the case. During that time, Marcus continued teaching at his various gyms. I filed a complaint with the State Athletic Commission that oversaw fitness instructor certifications. They opened an investigation but said it could take up to a year to complete. I also hired a lawyer to explore civil options. My attorney, Vanessa Kemp, was encouraging. Civil court has a lower burden of proof than criminal court. We don't need to prove beyond reasonable doubt. We just need to show it's more likely than not that Marcus engaged in sexual battery and intentional infliction of emotional distress. With 4 women testifying to the same pattern, we have a strong case. The civil lawsuit was filed in month 4. Marcus was served with papers while teaching a class at Ironclad Fitness. According to witnesses, he'd gone pale when the process server handed him the documents. Word spread quickly through the fitness community. Several of Marcus's current clients reached out to me. 3 more women came forward with stories similar to ours. The pattern was undeniable, but Marcus fought back hard. His attorney filed a motion to dismiss, arguing that consensual training relationships couldn't form the basis for assault claims, that all physical contact had occurred in the context of legitimate self-defense instruction, that any discomfort was the natural result of realistic training, not intentional misconduct. The judge denied the motion to dismiss. The case would go forward. During discovery, Marcus's attorney demanded all my recordings from our training sessions. I provided them knowing they showed exactly what Marcus had claimed, me participating willingly, him maintaining professional boundaries in most interactions. Nothing that looked obviously inappropriate to someone who didn't understand the context. But Vanessa was strategic. She hired an expert in self-defense instruction to review the recordings. Professor David Yang had taught martial arts and self-defense for 30 years. He analyzed every minute of footage and wrote a detailed report identifying dozens of moments where Marcus's technique was unnecessarily aggressive or where his contact lasted longer than required for effective instruction. Mr. Trent's methods are inconsistent with accepted best practices for self-defense training, Professor Yang wrote. The prolonged pinning positions, the excessive force during grip practice, the single student scenarios that isolated the trainee, all of these deviate significantly from standard protocols. While individual instances might be explainable, the cumulative pattern suggests inappropriate intent rather than pedagogical necessity. The expert report was devastating to Marcus's defense. His attorney tried to discredit Professor Yang, but Yang's credentials were unimpeachable. The civil trial began in month 8. All 4 of us testified. Jenna described how Marcus had held her in submission positions far longer than necessary. Rachel talked about the comments Marcus made about her body. Kimberly detailed how Marcus had isolated her during training sessions and created scenarios where she was underneath him on the mat. I testified about the original assault at Apex Fitness and how Marcus had spent 10 weeks rebuilding his access to me under the guise of self-defense training. Marcus's attorney tried to discredit each of us, pointed out that we'd all continued training with Marcus despite our supposed discomfort, suggested we'd coordinated our stories, implied we were motivated by financial gain from the lawsuit. But the pattern was too clear. 4 women over 5 years, all describing the same techniques, all reporting feeling uncomfortable but being told their discomfort was normal, all filing complaints with gym management that were dismissed. Professor Yang's expert testimony sealed it. He walked the jury through Marcus's techniques, explaining how each one violated established safety protocols. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. When they returned, they found in our favor on all counts. They awarded compensatory damages for emotional distress and medical expenses. Then they added punitive damages designed to punish Marcus for his predatory pattern and deter similar conduct. The total award was $2.8 million split between the 4 of us. Marcus appealed, but his appeal was denied. He was forced to pay. The money helped, but what mattered more was the public acknowledgement. A jury had looked at all the evidence, heard both sides, and concluded that Marcus Trent was a predator who'd used his position as an instructor to assault women. The State Athletic Commission revoked Marcus's certification. He could no longer legally teach self-defense or martial arts. The gyms where he'd worked terminated his contracts. His reputation was destroyed. Thanks for watching till the end. Make sure to subscribe and like to not miss the next story.